Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Thank you again for inviting me to be with you. It's been a pleasure to be with you these several times as you've searched and have found such a lovely new pastor, Joanne. Just truly a sweetheart. It's especially nice for me to be with you during your fall education series, especially synchronistically, truly synchronistically. I've been asked to speak on the power of the heart, or the energy of the heart in its role in our lives. Synchronistically, I do an annual retreat. This year's annual retreat is called Enlightenment and the Heart. In addition to that, we make monthly thoughts for the day in my spiritual group in Youngstown. They just happen to be on orange cards, and the theme this month is wholeness. So rather synchronistic by and large to be with you here this morning and to share these reflections with you. Let's begin. I'd like to begin today just with two opening comments before I move to the heart of the lesson. The first one is that the material I share with you here this morning is material that I received. I received by awakening during the night, and oftentimes I'm guided with material. And I received the material at that time to present this information to you, and not just by way to opening your minds, but to truly opening your hearts. Information, but especially inspiration. What I want to suggest is I'm the messenger to all of you here today. But in addition to being the messenger, I'm also the learner. I'm happy to deliver the message as well as to be inspired with you. Secondly, I believe that this material is very timely, not just for you here at Unity, but really for the evolution of our species here on the planet. I feel that moving the heart, the energy of the heart, and I'm going to give just a little bit of a different twist to the energy of the heart today, is exactly where many of us are. We are prepared to receive this message. We're ready to be expanded by it. Our previous growth has brought us to this moment, and this moment will be the impetus for our future growth, our further expansion into the great experience of life itself. The title I'd like to give, just a little tweak to the energy of the heart, is The Heart, the Organ of Truth. As some of you know, I'm a philosophy major, and I've always been intrigued by the teaching of the great philosophers, the great minds who have tried to answer the deeper questions of life so that we might live much more realistically rather than simply repeating the superficial things of life that keep us going in meaningless circles. It's kind of like the proverbial rocking horse, a lot of motion, but no movement. We just seem to go in circles at times, what I sometimes call the sickly cyclicals. Particularly in my study of philosophy, I would often hear the thought of a great teacher. Then I would ponder that thought, sometimes for years, and often return to it again and again. In this process of understanding, I learned two things. The first one was that it takes a while for an important thought to be understood. Oftentimes, the thought would be put into a catchy phrase or an affirmation which impressed me, but I really didn't fully understand it at the time. I'd be the first to admit that. I knew it was important, but its depth and its scope were beyond me for that particular moment. But secondly, when I finally did grasp the idea, I found that I could return to it again and again, always finding something more to it. It was like the thought or the principle was the inexhaustible reservoir of information and inspiration that each one of us can go to again and again, and it would be received according to the capacity of the learner at any given moment. I found that as my capacity to know increased, the inexhaustible reservoir would fill me up again and again and again. Well, obviously, these 2 points, not immediately understanding the important thought, and yet returning to it again and again, happily apply to the thought that I will share with you this morning. The thought that I share with you this morning comes from a 17th century philosopher by the name of Blaise Pascal, much more known for his science than his philosophy. But when I heard the teaching, it immediately resonated with me and has continued to be with me over the past 60 years. His teaching was this: the heart has reasons the mind knows not of. The heart has reasons the mind knows not of. Well, this really sounded profound the first time I heard it, and it is still one of the most profound truths of life that I have ever discovered. But as I said, from my limited experience when I first heard it, I didn't get the fuller meaning. What I got from it initially was that feelings, what is going on within us, within our hearts, are extremely important in life, and that feelings are often much more powerful than thoughts, both for the good as well as for the bad. Sometimes feelings made you more real, but sometimes following your feelings got you into trouble with less than happy results. Although I didn't comprehend the fuller meaning of the teaching, the heart has reasons the mind knows not of, I knew that something was there, and I did go back to it again and again. Actually, it was these 3 experiences, these 3 additional experiences, that helped me to understand the deeper meaning of that truth. The first experience was when I was making a very difficult decision in my life, when I decided to leave the priesthood. I was a Roman Catholic priest for 14 years. Namely, I just had to make a decision as to whether to continue to be a priest or to leave the ministry. Well, as I worked on making this decision, I dutifully, probably as many of you have done, made a list of the pros and cons. And I weighed the pros and cons against each other. Regardless of how many times I followed the process, it always came to an inconclusive result. There was one major reason to stay and one major reason to go. The mind had done its job beautifully at defining the problem, but it still left me in the dilemma of what I should do, of making the decision. I needed a decision maker. When I endeavored to have the mind decide, I found it could not make up its mind. When it said to leave, it then gave me reasons for staying. When I decided to stay, it gave me reasons for leaving. The mind could not make up its mind because it was never meant to be our decision maker. The mind was made to analyze, but not to decide. Let's get back to the decision. Finally, after experiencing the mind's limitation, I asked the decision-making question, namely, what do I feel that I should do? And the answer was clear. I felt that I should leave. And of course, I did. But the mind was not done with me. It tried to get right back into the decision. and wanted me to consider again all of the pros and cons. I clearly experienced that the mind was not only a poor decision maker, but now I saw it as a troublemaker. It wanted to sabotage the decision I had made from the feelings of my heart. It was at this time that Pascal's truth came back to me with greater power. The heart has reasons the mind knows not of. How true. How true. And thankfully, how important it is to know and to follow this guidance. The second incident that helped me to delve deeper into the wisdom, the energy of the heart, came from my study of A Course in Miracles. While the basic teaching of the Course has been stated in many ways, it was the clarity of the Course's teaching that helped me to understand better the depth of the heart's wisdom. In a nutshell, the purpose of A Course in Miracles is to help one to know and then experience that you have an internal teacher at the very center of your being. And once you come to know this internal teacher, you'll never have to read another book or pursue any other directional wisdom. And not only do you have this internal teacher, but it is also a spontaneous, unerring guide. Wow. A spontaneous, unerring guide. You have all the wisdom you ever need spontaneously and unerringly within you. Wow, I said to myself, if this is true, then this must be the greatest thing you could possibly acquire. And actually, you really didn't have to acquire it. You already had it. You just needed to be in touch with it and allow it to speak to you. Could this be true? Is it really this simple? Could it be this powerful? Well, of course, Pascal would say, because the heart has reasons the mind knows not of. There was one other experience that influenced me in understanding the heart, its energy, and particularly it itself as the organ of truth. The teacher of Paramahansa Yogananda was a guru by the name of Sri Yukteswar. Paramahansa is the founder of the Self-Realization Fellowship, pretty cool person. Well, Sri Yukteswar has written this little book called The Holy Science. It's one of these little books that you read it and read it and read it and read it, and you try to understand it, and there's always something more that's in it. It's not just a book about science, but it's really about the science of the heart. It presumes a knowledge of Hindu spiritual psychology and a lot of personal experience to be able to grasp its teachings, which I feel that I have, and I can read it somewhat intellectually with understanding. Well, regularly, I would pick up this small little book and read it. Or better yet, I would try to experience the message. Well, each time I read it, I got more and more out of it. And it took me longer and longer to read it as I tried to absorb its message. In my fourth reading of the book, I saw something that intrigued me as a philosophy major. Sri Yukteswar made a distinction between the mind and the intellect. That was interesting to me. In my studies, most books and teachers have a tendency to equate the mind with the intellect. They are simply aspects of thinking. But Sri Yukteswar made this distinction. he said something that has moved me so deeply. He said that the intellect is a function of the heart. The intellect is a function of your heart. Well, finally, on my fourth reading, I had the aha moment. Oh my, the intellect is a function of the heart. He went on to explain that the intellect is the decider, the discerner of the mind's thoughts. The intellect decides what to do with the information that the senses and the minds give to it. Finally, I had the philosophical piece to go along with the theology of the Course in Miracles and the experience of the power of my own feelings. Pascal's teaching seems to me to be more powerful than ever. The heart has reasons the mind knows not of. Or should I say, the reservoir of knowledge was releasing more and more of itself as I became more able to receive it. To know this truth, that the heart has reasons the mind knows not of, I believe, is to possess the greatest wisdom of life. To know it philosophically, theologically, and most of all, experientially. You have the organ of truth at the very center of your being. Is that not what it means to be made in the image and likeness of life itself? In conclusion, what I would suggest is that you have the divine cosmic wisdom dancing within your own heart. Come not just to know that it is there, but come to use the energy of your heart. Come to use it in your discerning, in your decision-making. Don't get confused with the mind. The mind is terrific as the implementer of your decisions, but it is horrendous as the decision maker. For the most important function of your life, namely to know what life is about and to live it well, you have your heart, the organ of truth, which has reasons the mind knows not